Welcome to The Next Man Up, where we explore the misconceptions and paradox around modern masculinity. Join me on my quest to seek the truth through unfiltered conversations with the men behind the masks, so women can better understand men and men can better understand themselves.
I want to be dominated, but I'm not comfortable with someone else in power because my ideology says that I shouldn't give that power up. And so when I then do that, it's the thing that turns me on, but I get angry at myself for it. Then I feel ashamed, and then my body shuts down, counters it.
With intensity, you mean?
Well, more there is a blocking of emotions, and then having that teased by the fact that we're also aroused by the thing that triggers the negative emotion a lot of times. So we don't have concordance between our emotions, between our psychological triggers for arousal, and then how we embody it physically.
Aaron, thanks for coming today.
It is a pleasure to be here, Coral.
Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sounds so formal. In one part of myself, I just want to be like, well, I'm a dude, like I'm a regular guy. But then also when I look at the experiences I've had and the work that I do, I realize that in certain ways I have a perspective and take on interacting with women and men that most don't get that opportunity to. So who am I right here? Well, I guess I'm the next man up.
Yes.
I would say that if you're asking who I am in terms of a life purpose type of thing, I mean, I'm a man on a mission, and my mission is to help people be better connected to themselves as well as each other. And the way that I go about doing that is by making intimacy simple and finding out very clear ways that people can start to live that out into their life. And where I've seen a big missing gap of information, and what I focus on is teaching people how to make love in a way that love making actually makes love. And a lot of the things that I'm seeing in terms of advice that's out there and in terms of the lived relations that people that are coming to me is we have a lot of diagnostic tools to understand our dysfunctions, but we do not have the protocols or the steps laid out in front of us to be able to change the prognosis, to change the outcome of towards what we would like. And we don't even often have an image or a picture in our head or an idea of what the potential is.
Yeah. How did you get started on this path in the first place?
Yeah, it's a good question as well. I mean, my background very quickly is I'm a son of a preacher's man, so watch out.
Second Aaron that's the son of a preacher on the show.
Yeah, that's right.
Wild.
I was seeing your podcast about that. What are the chances?
Yeah.
So I grew up as a kid of evangelical Christian missionary parents in different countries, Portugal, Costa Rica. And academically, my background is in the cognitive sciences with leaning towards linguistics, and then later like semiotics, how the brain interprets meaning. And then professionally, really started to work with, one of the first jobs after teaching English as a second language, and again, being in a very multicultural environment, was helping men and women be able to get over the anxiety of meeting others. And so it was somewhat like the pickup scene where you'd see with these like kind of guys that were going out and doing game, but also women as well. And then just deeply noticing that they can go home with somebody, but then they don't know what to do with the person once they're there. And let alone then how does that even turn into like a long-term relationship that bears any fruit? I mean, I remember sitting with very wealthy people saying, well, I can buy things for a partner, or I can look a certain way and get whatever enhancements to appeal to people, depending what sex I was speaking to. But that's just that first impression. And they were kind of living from one first impression to the next to wow the person. And then when the chance came to go deeper, they would almost always jump to the next relation. In fact, they would even avoid the intimacy that they wanted because they knew that then there was likely just pain and they could just jump to the next high and the next high and have an image that, fit how they wanted to see themselves more than when they started to look deeper and especially let someone else see themselves deeper.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a theme with pretty much all of my male clients. It's like they have a lot of external success. They look the part, it's all there. And then they're at the top and they've been just bypassing intimacy with hedonistic pursuits for so long. And they know there's something more there because they're constantly listening to Huberman or Modern Wisdom and reading the self-help books, but they don't know how to do the thing. And your work with your partner, Saida, Dr. Saida Desolé, who's also my mentor, and I'm in her program, her embodied psychosexual method program. You guys live the embodiment of your work. So did you come to it? I believe you started like with your ex-wife or something. Was there something there?
Yeah, your original question was, how did I come into the work? I would say that I am a person that notices patterns. And I remember being very heavily in a church environment and seeing people be able to speak about death and salvation and prayer and all these very deep theological, philosophical points and how to really live your life and all this discipline and extreme comfort, talking about things that could give a lot of people difficulty to speak around. However, where I didn't see that confidence follow through was in terms of sex. Yet sex was held as this absolutely sacred thing, but never at any point did I ever feel that there was some teachings coming forward or a feeling of resonance in those that spoke about it, that it was as sacred as prayer. Or at least they would say it, but it always came from the perspective of, well, don't do that until you're married. But then what? And so to me, I don't know, probably just like with your psychological background, and there's an interesting thing that I did as a kid. I had this vision in my mind that in this kind of other universe, which I guess I look at it now and I go, this is my subconscious, but I was a black dragon. And all the other people were the nude people, the naked people. And they all were trying to, like, they would go around naked and they had this kind of like amorphous forms that just seemed like really degenerative. And they were like trying to get some kind of like power from me. And it was just an interesting thing to think about that. And I became comfortable with this kind of alternate reality, but then it was the exact opposite that I would see in church because everyone was like very well dressed up. And it was as if that side was everything that they were trying to cover up with their Sunday costume. And I hate to say that because I do believe these people were genuine from their hearts, but when it came to sexuality, they just didn't ever have any real teachings or educations on that allowed for the deepening to match the level of everything else that they were learning. And I was a very sexual kid. I mean, so when you ask me like, where did these things start? I mean, I remember it was like a birthday party that I had and I'm like, oh, let's have an explore, show and tell game with our bodies. Like I'm looking at it and as a kid, I'm like, okay, well, you name the body part and you can either have it touched, kissed, or blown on, And for me, I'm like, hey, this is great, And so we had all the different body parts from, and we can speak freely on the podcast, I guess, everything from buttholes to genitals to chest to cheek to lips. And it was interesting, like what kind of things we were choosing. And then we're all just having a great time. But, we don't even think about like, oh, let's share. What did you guys do with your birthday party time? And all of a sudden the parents are like getting very...
Did they find out?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What happened?
Well, it was really interesting because some parents lost their shit and the kids then shut down. My parents, like, they're like, Aaron, what did you do? Like, why did it happen? And they're like, they kind of would talk me through why these things should be wait for till marriage, etc. But I never felt any shame off of it. And I could feel my parents had some sense of discomfort. And maybe that's what it was that when I was feeling the adult's discomfort, I was like, I can't really take you seriously. And also, like, why do you feel uncomfortable with this? Maybe you should experiment a little bit more with it, which is an odd thing to be coming from, a 5-year-old.
That's so wise. Like, I wish
Well, that was the thing. This, like, I've always been like extremely sexual.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I also was like, oh no, but this is like being reserved to a certain level for when I end up meeting like my life partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yet at the same time, I need to educate myself on it as much as possible and approach it like I would anything else, like with sports or education. You have to graduate to that. And I just always sort of had that part of me. And so I think because of then also having a very like kinesthetic sense of the world, I was very interested in this. But then at the same time, my other education was that I had a lot of female friends. Like the majority of my friends, if I were to just look in terms of numbers, are women. With then some very deep friendships that are also women, but then my guy friends have a tendency to have a lot more depth to them. And so I was constantly around women, being friends with them, and not actually being. I didn't ejaculate until I was 19. I didn't have sex until I was 21.
Interesting. So what was before that then? Like other forms of experimentation and intimacy?
I was like a ball of horniness. I mean, my terror was that my pants were too tight during Sunday. That's when I had to wear my Sunday pants. And those things would just irritate my erection to like, not irritate in a bad way, but like I would just have an erection throughout all of church because the pants were too tight. And then, of course, you have to sit there and not move and listen to the pastor. And I'm like trying to literally adjust things. And my mom would be like, Aaron, you're disturbing, like, pay attention. I'm like, Mom, it's not just as simple. I didn't have any words for it, but I just had a ton of sexual energy. And so it wasn't until later that I identified that as, even probably the last 2 years, people would always go like, oh no, I do the energetic side, and Aaron, you're only doing the anatomy and like the very physical part with suction sex, and I'm like, you know what? I don't really know what you're talking about then when you say energy, but then realizing it's like, no, I've just been swimming in that water since I was a kid, and so for me, I was just, I would have tremendous like sexual dream life. When I would be interacting with somebody, I was having very deep sexual experiences. I ended up like dinosaurs in massage books where it was my stick. Later, like kind of UFOs and stuff like that. But and so I would read a lot on massage. And so for me, my sexuality was very much sensuality and the ability to feel things. And I didn't need to touch my cock. Like it was just always erect and like kind of emitting energy. Later, when I met up with like 20 years later with people from high school, they're like, well, of course you're working in that. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you always were very sexual. And I was like, I wasn't having any sex. Didn't even have a girlfriend like that. And they're like, we could just tell. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because that was something in one sense I thought I contained, but by containing it, I think it also magnified it in a very different way that gives other expressions towards sexuality than just your obvious, well, it's just crank and yank and dump some cum.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. As a single person, like I have been celibate for the past, I guess, like 3 months now, intentionally. But I'm a very sexual person, and I'm like, I live so much just in my imagination, and I can channel that. And I've had these really significant energetic orgasms and heartgasms, which we'll get into in a minute, where it's not necessarily, and in fact, as you know, and I want to dig into this, I have not been able to have a partnered orgasm from a male partner, which is rooted in years of sex work conditioning, but it started before that because there's a reason I got into sex work. It's a control thing, right? Yeah. It's me gatekeeping my pleasure. So how Aaron and I met was around this, I guess, like 10 months ago or something. When I
undisclosed place.
Yes, yeah, exactly. At the retreat for the program that Dr. Saida runs, and we did a sexological bodywork session, which is a lot more than that. It's a lot more involved. And that was the first time I believe that I kind of named it out loud. And yeah, let's walk through what that was like. So
when you, so I'd like to say kind of a caveat in terms of like the sexological bodywork, because I believe that is an actual school that has a certain kind of like teaching and philosophy and everything to it. What we were essentially going through was, what are the ways that we can get the body to work as like a system towards the ability of generating pleasure? Because what you had said was that, I've never had an orgasm with a partner, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going off of like
male partner.
Male. Okay.
Because I'm straight as hell. So it's like with women, I have, because I was so disconnected from the intimacy there.
Okay.
It was not vulnerable for me.
So the specifics of a male partner, I don't know if I remember you telling me that when you said that, but there you go.
The more you know.
And it was also, so it was with a male partner, and then on top of it, that many male partners had thought that you'd had an orgasm with them, because you had several of when Harry met Sally moments.
Oh, yeah. The best. You made me do one, actually.
Precisely.
You made me fake one. And I was like, what?
Why am I doing that? Well, I'd actually like to get into, because that was a very important step towards it. Do you think you know why I had you do that?
I mean, I would obviously to call myself out on my bullshit there, but I'm wondering what you think. There was a lot of profound moments in what happened there. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, so one of the pieces that, when I just walked you through at the very beginning about helping people live more connected, that speaks to our values. And the values is the component that both myself and Saida, when we're working with people, we're helping to align them with their values, and not just from like a mental space, but actually like with what they're doing with their bodies. So that way all of their actions align with bringing those values into reality. And I think people normally think of attachment patterns of like being avoidant or anxious, but they don't really see how those lead them on or off towards the values that they have. The piece that I was working with you on that actually had more to do like making intimacy simple. So intimacy, the word comes from the Latin intimare, which means to impress upon. So if you think about us as clay, every interaction that we have with each other, we're leaving impressions upon one another. So there is a certain amount of ability to go into pleasure when you are not having intimacy. Such as you said, like with women, you're able to have the orgasm because it didn't bring up a lot of the different things that probably had to do with past attachment patterns. And we all have this. I think relations, as we deepen the cycle of it, we will have opportunities, especially in intimacy and in sex. I think you had in your, I think it's in your podcast, kind of in the clip, you'll say that sex is like an image of like your internal world, and the more that you can handle that,
or sex work is shadow work. I could get into the psychological unpacking of all of it, right?
Well, what you were saying, I think it was something even just more simple in terms of, you're like, when you kind of gain mastery over your sexual life, then you are going to have that show up in other aspects of your life, because it's like nutrition. It's like
hey, do one thing, diet, so you do everything.
Exercise. Precisely, that's what you said. Like, do one thing, you do everything. So now to get back to the original question, was in intimacy, where a lot of times it's drawn up as this is intimacy's either candles or it's romance. We have like a very specific image of how it's supposed to show up. The same thing we do like about kinks, or even with an attachment patterns, and we get kind of stuck into that frame of it. Well, intimacy, when I work with it, I've noticed that there's a very simple pattern of the ability to speak one's truth or be in one's truth, to communicate that, to express it, have it be received. Then that allows for responsibility. the ability to respond to that truth, which then creates trust, which then creates celebration. And you can see this playing out in many different ways. The words will slightly change. So in a sexual experience, your truth is, do I want this? Do I not want this? Like at just a very basic level. Responsibility is, do you then follow the thing that you want and don't override the thing that you don't want? Can you do that with yourself? Can you do that with a partner? Can your partner? That then creates trust, either if you're doing this cycle within yourself or, again, with the person that you're with, which then allows for celebration, in which case, when we're talking about pleasure, we're meaning orgasm. Now, as we start to go between that truth and responsibility and that depth gets created, it can then bring up past relations that we've had where maybe we can only go to a certain level, and then things start to kind of fall off the tracks.
Yeah, Chris Donahue, who was on the show, had a great quote about how we have sex up to our level of development. And I was like, that's so true. It's being mirrored back to you, what you can and can't receive. Right?
And I would even add to that we have sex up to our level of development, and that then only matches our level of relational development. And our relational development only is reflected in the depth that we can go sexually. So we have a tremendous opportunity when we're in a sexual exchange with a person to deepen that level of intimacy with ourselves and each other. We are at, you could say, some of our most impressionable moments, which then in everyday life, you'll hear a person open up, they'll have a bad sexual experience, and it'll be 20 years later until they end up like dealing with it again. I've had so many female clients who had no issues at all with orgasm when they were younger. And they had that one first real partner, and they said, oh my gosh, what is that? You ejaculate? Like, what is this liquid here? And then it'll be 30 years later, and their bodies will never have released again. And that's just one example, female ejaculation, but that doesn't, I mean, this shows up in many different ways. So the piece with you was when we first started to speak, uncovering and just having you say, look, I am like an extremely sexually, I mean, like if you were to have, you're kind of like the epitome of like a sexually desirable woman. I mean, you were like doing high-end escort work, and you have an image of beauty and a way of carrying yourself. I mean, like literally men were paying, just for the chance to even be with you. So to come from that place and then to state, I can't do this in my own life and with clients, I fake, like that's a profound amount of truth that's
I'm
being
saying this
stated.
for the first time publicly too. I've said it,
Well, and also like we spoke about this beforehand, so I didn't just like I didn't just out her right here.
This is important for me. It's like similar to writing. Like once I get it out there, that's part of my process of healing the thing, and that's what keeps me so invested in doing this work and along this path, because I'm so invested in getting closer to everything myself and healing myself first and foremost, right?
Well, so that was that first step then.
Yeah.
Was that piece of truth.
Yeah.
The other part of it was okay, let me see behind the veil. How much are you? So when we first spoke, I then heard what you had to say. I then was able to like go through and say, okay, these are some of the ways I think that we can address that. So we're building, again, that ability of like truth, responsibility. We're getting some trust between each other. That first conversation like went well, and you were like, okay, I'm excited about this next thing. I think one of the things you also mentioned too is that you're like, I would like to like feel something, like just have like a sense of emotion like during it.
Yeah, I tend to numb out like a lot of men do. I can relate to the male experience so much more than the female experience, because I've had to suppress and repress so much, right? And I like really embodied that split that so many men carry from my experience as a sex worker. So like it's hard for me to cry. It's hard for me to feel real time. Like I will do it separate from the moment that I'm in.
Yes.
So I did say that too. I was like, I have a feeling there's a lot of emotion there that I want to, that I need to tap into. There's something that needs to be released.
Yes.
Like, and it's not just like my orgasm. It's like, there's something else there. We got there, but I left it.
Well, that was the part though. I just remember like, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to promise anything because who knows where you're at on the day. Who knows where I'm at, where things are at, just life. You can't force these things. But, it was like, okay, well, so you want to have like pleasure, orgasm, and like an emotional release, which in some sense sounds quite simple. But in another sense, you're like, well, okay, well, how do we make that come about?
Tall order at the same time for one.
So then that first piece, because we only have like some hours, and you're like in the middle of teachings and doing all kinds of other things. So we, the first step was like, okay, well, let me see then what is your orgasm that you have with these guys. And I remember you look at me and you're like,
I was like, you want me to do it?
What do you mean? And I'm like, well, just show me. You're like, you mean just like right now, just do it? And I'm like, yeah. And literally within half a second, I don't know if we should give away your secrets, but you just flop back on the bed. One arm goes here, hair's flipping the other way, and you're just like,
insert clip.
Insert clip.
Yeah.
And then like you're like really starting to dial it up. I'm like, okay, that's enough. That's good. Like we've got it now. But I wanted you to feel the truth of what you had been doing, so that way then you could also have the contrast of where we are going.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Secondly, I wanted you to know that I knew what that looked like, so that way then you wouldn't be tempted to need to try and fake it when we were like going through the process of actually like waking your body up. So then after that, I was like, okay, next, let's go through and just learn some like basic skills, because the way that we've been trained, and I don't know if it's just societally or this the general knowledge that's the zeitgeist that's out there in the world, or if it's through porn. I mean, frankly, I've just seen it across the field, so I can't really say it's just one thing, but our general understanding of sexuality is a lot through like trying to force and like using a lot of muscle contraction, and so there's a way that people's bodies do this, and to me it's just completely backwards. And then there's also the psychological part in terms of how we work, almost screw ourselves over, and not in a good way, with our mental arousal that then also counters it.
With intensity, you mean?
Well, more there is a blocking of emotions, and then having that teased by the fact that we're also aroused by the thing that triggers the negative emotion a lot of times. So we don't have concordance between our emotions, between our psychological triggers for arousal, and then how we embody it physically. So how that would look is like, well, like a really basic one could be, I want to be dominated, but I'm not comfortable with someone else in power because my ideology says that I shouldn't give that power up. And so when I then do that, it's the thing that turns me on, but I get angry at myself for it. Then I feel ashamed, and then my body shuts down, and like I go into lock and freeze. So like maybe that's like a holding pattern that happens, for instance. And so you see this playing out again, and a person never really can go through a positive sexual experience unless they really have to try and create some scenario that just almost like where the stars align and they get out of their way in one way, but then they typically don't understand how it happened.
Or they have to keep them separate, which is, the whole, even the profane can be sacred thing is so important. I did not understand that. My mom raised me to believe that, I remember her saying to me, how a man has sex with you is who he is.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, if he calls me like, then I'm a whore, then I'm bad.
Yep.
And now I'm like, through this transgressive healing and kinks, I'm like, there's so much there, because I'm very drawn to the negative aphrodisiacs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's showing someone my shadow.
Yeah.
That's like the most radical trust you can get if you can express those and know it's play. And it does not dictate the healthy relational dynamic. It's like we can set that container, right?
Or even how do we merge it so that it actually integrates?
Yes.
So that was kind of one of the things. So the next thing I said was, let's go through and like build some skills here in terms of breathing. Before that, even just how do we signal with the body what yes and no is. So a big foundational part of embodied love, and we've trademarked embodied consent, is that it's learning how to feel your yes and no and express it. So that way, one, you're not thinking about how should I be in these things, and your partner isn't having to guess what's going on. So again, that truth and responsibility also is being done on a bodily level with then the option of words. But so I remember though, the first funny thing was, is like I said, let's go over these skills. You literally, I don't know if you remember, you almost rolled your eyes. You kind of like went like this. And then later, as I've read through your Substacks and stuff, I think you had been at a retreat and you had to do something for a guy.
Oh, ISTA. Yeah. And I was like, I should be getting paid for this shit. That was
And you're like, I do work all the time.
Yeah.
I want to receive.
Yeah.
And so I think my feeling was, as I've like reflected on that moment, you were probably like, what the fuck?
Well,
I'm coming to you and now you're making me have to learn new skills. Like, I just want to lay here and have you do the thing.
Yeah, yeah, because ISTA was right like a couple months after our session. So you switched things into gear for me in terms of receiving. And I was like, I don't want to go back to gear after that, right? Then it just became like, it's all about me now.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, but the interesting thing though is like to be able to receive, if our bodies are blocking receiving, I mean, how open and receptive are we if we're clenching or trying to force something? Like if you watch a sprinter, so my dad, he was a competitive sprinter, and he used to, when he ran like in high school, would just use all this strain, but then he would watch the Olympic athletes and he'd see their faces like being relaxed and like to the point that like the cheeks jiggle. I mean, like everything's loose, but at the same time it's very directed energy, so that only the necessary areas that are needing to fire and relax in timing will propel you towards what it is you're wanting to do. And so to be able to even have your body be in a receptive state, you would need to be able to like actually get your body mechanics correct, which is why then there is that. Plus then the psychological aspect. You have a very active mind. You're very intelligent.
The worst overactive mind. It took, yeah. So that's what I want to say. It's like, you know, I remember fighting it because I was like, I have to, like, how long is this going to, you know? And that's not how it works.
Yeah.
And like, you really took your time establishing trust and asking for permission. And I was like, I already gave you permission, kind of thing, you know? And it's like, no, but my mind did, but my body had not yet.
Yeah.
And like, what was so interesting is I'm a very loud, like cerebral, opinionated person. And you'll remember this. I was like mute. I was like so locked in my body. And like you kept being like, make sounds. And I like couldn't do it, you know? And it slowly started to come out, but it took a long time.
Well, and that was the first piece though, is that, so yes, there was learning the body mechanics, but then also the part of you going, okay, I can receive, was actually just following the directions of, we're going to go through learning these steps first, and we'll get you to where you want to go. And because I know what you wanted was to like just be able to receive touch and just to kind of relax and like just kind of enter into more of a bliss state, etc. And so by the time though, you kind of said, all right, I used the skills that you were learning, which hadn't been put together like that for you, that then gave your mind a way to actually like use its power to go, okay, I'm going to use my mind to get my body to work in this specific way that kind of feels a little bit backwards at first to like orient all those body mechanics. So that kept your mind active, as opposed to, which is what we normally hear, is like, just turn your mind off or physically just surrender. Yeah. It's like, but how do I do that though when I have all these breaks going on that are stopping me?
And it's like taking agency for yourself too, and reclaiming your own sexual sovereignty. Because, you know, as I was saying earlier, I oscillate between like, okay, going inward, going with myself and getting, you know, doing the Jade practice and familiarizing myself with my own pleasure. And then like wanting to bypass that by being like, I want a gangbang, or I want, you know, because that's not that, like, that's also a way for me to not take that responsibility myself and get out of my mind completely, instead of being like, let's do this like the slow, integrated way. And then we can decide where we want to go from there. Right.
Well, that was listening to your talk with Nick Warner, which, by the way, shout out to Nick. I
love Nick. We love
really love Nick. I've spoken to him once on the phone. Would like to spend some more time with that man. But he was speaking about the development of the prince to lay prince to king, and you'd ask the question, like, what is that development for a woman? I don't think you went down that path. And so this is a podcast you said for helping men understand women, women understand men.
Yeah.
One of the parallels that I see at the, I don't know if you'd want to call it like the princess phase of women, is this idea that, no, I'm just going to be me and I won't change anything about myself. And then this mythical prince or king is going to show up, and then they're going to like elicit out of me all of this development. And it's very much dependent on the other person doing that. And how that shows up also in the bedroom is like, no, I want a guy just to come in here, do his thing, and like unlock my mysteries, and I can simply kind of lay back and be there for the ride, you know?
Yeah.
And so with the ability to give you the power of figuring out this is how my body works, now you have the ability to dial up how much sensation, how much pleasure you want, and you can be choosing that, which then also is going to help you relax around the whole thing of, well, do I lose my power when I allow a man to bring me to this place? And this is like, no, you're actually the one that's doing it. I'm there as an assist. In fact, I didn't even involve my energy in it. I was just there to help you raise and experience your own energy, your own pleasure. And so, I mean, I don't know if you've thought of this, but that allowed some of those guards then to come down.
Yeah.
At the same time, I wasn't making the connection about me. The connection was about with you. And I was there to help guide in that experience and to create a container. And I don't even like the word safety a lot of time, because safety to me is more, I'm going to eliminate all the possibilities of anything negative happening. Whereas what I look at it as is like, I'm creating helping you create security for yourself, which is, if things happen, I know how to navigate them. Therefore, I feel safe. And that power there then allows you to go, okay, a lot of these triggers that probably would block pleasure in an intimate setting in a relational life weren't going to come up with me. For one, we're not in a relationship. So you don't have as much of the kind of everyday life looping out. Precisely. And at the same time, though, so we've dealt now with the physical factor of it. We dealt with like the mental aspects of it, because I mean, I had some ideas of what these different psychological triggers were specific for yourself based off of when we were speaking.
What did you think they were, or know that they are?
Well, I don't even know, but if it was a knowing, like, it's not like I'm, I'm not a guru, like what I will do though is I will have an idea from what you say, but what you say and what shows up might not always be the same thing. And so then it's more of a testing and a feeling out. So I think that you liked the feeling of power. And that isn't always just the traditional idea of power of like, oh, being a dom, like, which is like a suit, etc. And that, I'm sure like if I showed up like that, you would have been like, oh, hell no, now we're going to have a dom off, see who's the bigger dom. And then but it was more of dominance in the sense of like, okay, this person knows what they're doing. So therefore there's a sense of like mastery that's there. They have an ability to actually like attune to me, show me things about myself. Another piece that I think is a big one for you is you like novelty, like something that like, it's like, I haven't had this experience before, where some people that's not at all like their big turn on. And then I think there was also a sense of an ability to have spontaneity, like where like there's like a clear like state shift. And so these were three things that I noticed would be some psychological factors. But the fact is that you're actually some people have like a specific type, and then others are more of like a mix. I think we all have abilities to feel into all the different ones, but in general, like when I look at mental arousal, the triggers are anticipation, spontaneity, environment, which can be either an internal or an external environment, meaning that an internal emotional state, how you're feeling about the person, or it could be an external environment of an ambiance of music or, out in nature. There's then taboo, which I look at as more of like, do you like to keep rules, break rules? Do you like to be rewarded or punished for keeping or breaking the rules? And that can come in all the different fun combinations and it can switch in a moment. Then there's power, and power again doesn't always mean your traditional idea of dom sub, but it could be like very fraction parts. It's like, well, I like to be with a person who's physically powerful or a person who is mentally powerful.
Mhm.
And then on top of all of those, so those are kind of like the general 6 categories that I would say people's mental arousal fits into.
Mhm.
But then you need to then work with, well, what are the emotional components that come up, because there's definite emotional breaks and accelerants that happen within that frame. And then also what's the directionality, who's the one that's doing and who is it for,
Mhm.
that then really factors into all this, plus then figuring out how that fits together in the moment with what's happening with the body. So in that time of session was getting you to go into just an experiential, sensual place where
Mhm.
you could be in more of a felt state, because in those moments, I think a lot of times you would not be feeling, you would start to think. And that's why then the second part is, after we went to the skill sets, I just started to give you a massage
Mhm.
and have you use the tools that we spoke about during a massage to have you start communicating. I remember at one point you go like, "Oh, are you a masseuse?" I was like, "Yeah, I've done massage for a lot of my life." And that, then you went into a place of like just kind of more calm and relaxation, which I think was the piece that you originally wanted when I said, "Hey, let's do the skill sets," and you pretty much rolled your eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
Was I want to, like, I'm doing all the time. I want to like be more on the receiving side of things.
Yeah.
But when you went into that, as opposed to just being passive, and I've heard you mention in other podcasts where you talk about my work with the active receiver
Mhm.
and being an adaptive giver,
Mhm.
that was then able to happen, because even though you were in a more passive state, you were still being active in not just laying there,
Oh, you were
but
making
moving.
me. You were like, because you gave me the
Cues, I
yeah.
guess.
Well, yeah, you gave me permission to be
Yes.
the active receiver by like with the embodied consent thing, like lean in with your body, show me with your body. It was like, which was so important for me, without the going voice and head. It was like, okay, lean in, lean out, and attuning, moving with me,
Yeah.
right? So didn't even know that was available to me. And then I'm curious, like I guess you can explain the cervix heart connection, because I did not see any of this coming,
Mm.
pun intended. And and then I had this like heartgasm, which I thought that was, coming from a clinical sexology background. I'm like, what the hell, And I was like, I was, it was emotional rupture, and I was crying, and then after I looked it up, and then you tied it back for me and explained it to me. So what happened in that? Like, what was that? So you may have heard me mention that I'm a certified sexologist and intimacy coach for men. And look, if you've made it this far into the episode, you already know that you're not like most guys, most likely. You've done the work, you've built the life, but when it comes to intimacy, something just probably isn't clicking. You're either holding back parts of yourself or you're living a bit of a double life. And that gap is exactly what I help you see. So I built something called the Wheel of Truth. It's a simple but super confronting exercise that shows you exactly where you are out of alignment in your sex life, your relationships, and the parts of yourself that you've kept hidden. So if you're actually ready to look at that, go to coralosborne.com/pod for the free download. You can also access it in the show notes.
It's interesting because I'm also very much like you in the sense of these fancy terms. There's like hundreds of different types of orgasms, and people will describe them very poetically. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, how would you tell a person? I mean, I was just at my family's island, like in Anguilla, where my mom's side of the family's from, and there's a fruit there that I've loved since I was a kid. It's called a sea grape.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mentioned it to Saida, and Saida's like, well, what does it taste like? How do you describe what a pineapple tastes like when someone's never had that? And you can talk about like golden juiciness that's like has these citrus sparks that awakens your tongue, but you're just like, you don't have any frame of reference for that. It doesn't really help or get you there. And sometimes it can even work counter to it because you can be having the experience, but it doesn't match the description of what the label had beforehand. I mean, Saida talks about her orgasms as like in her younger years, not thinking that she was having an orgasm because it wasn't the experience that she was having. And so, as you're stating, like the heart orgasm or energy orgasm or full, I was also very like skeptical more about the terms, less about the experiences, because I think the experiences do happen, but if we don't pay attention to them, how they happen on the microcosm, then we can't learn how to grow them to the point that then they become powerful enough that we're like, oh no, this is definitely a real experience. And so we just ignore it. So after we went through the kind of the phase then of just working with the massage, which also wasn't just to get your mind to relax and go into that receptive state. I mean, we worked with your neck, which is going to help with the pelvic area. We worked with your stomach, which is going to help that heart connection down to the genitals, plus just increase general blood flow and circulation, plus the fact that then you are also doing all of the different body mechanics that we spoke about to just create an optimal scenario. From there, we needed to work like with your body where your body was like, I want to actually like be touched. I want to like bring you in. And we were working with hands and gloved hands, which is just how I work. And we work in places that allow for this type of work as well. But your ability for your body to actually be, I mean, active receiver sounds like a really nice thing mentally. Most people say that they understand it, but to actually be it and do it is something else, because that coordination of actually having your vagina communicate to you, yes or no, I want this, let's wait, let's pause here for a second, taking the time to actually check in, but then the physicality of actually bringing something into your body. We don't have a word for that.
In, as Saida says, right? Like
exactly.
Yeah.
Or I'll say swallowing sometimes, or use the word engulfment. I mean, I remember spending like an entire week just thinking about what's the word for being penetrated, because we talk about penetrative sex, but we literally don't have a word for the other side of that, which is just as powerful, which is why I think also anyone on the receiving side of penetration has difficulties. And it doesn't matter what sexual orientation, gender identity, body type that I've worked with, it's always that active receiving side that really needs to be trained. So that way then the nervous system can like feel the empowerment of choosing it, and then can also like truly be prepped for that. And so when you did that, you stayed very present with yourself and with me, and didn't go into a place of like shutting off and just having something done to you and needing to fake, because it was the opposite. Now it's like, no, my body's actually having to coordinate and do this, which then kept your mind active. And so just that of itself, like you're starting a process now, which is likely very different than what you'd had before, which then allowed for a different potential outcome. From there, we then went through and we're like, let's figure out what you're just feeling. Like, just report to me, like, how do you have numbness? Do you have pain? Where's there tension? And you're just like, nope, not really feeling much there at all. So that's always an interesting one, because you would hear people that have either trauma, or like sometimes people lump sex work into the trauma category. They go, oh no, of course there's going to be all these things that come up. And then you have people who've had like, let's say, quote unquote, a blessed life of not having a lot of different turmoil. And so they shouldn't have any pain. But I've found plenty of times that it doesn't line up that way. Someone that you think would have a lot of numbness or pain, when they're met from a place of openness and like genuine like connection, then maybe they find out, oh, actually I didn't have a lot of physical tension here. And I think your statement was at the end, it's like, I found out I have a bomb ass pussy. Like,
You heard it here, folks.
and because, I mean, I think it's a very normal thing though, that someone who's very like beautiful and has a certain image, but then doesn't have the experiences that everyone else is talking about of pleasure, you kind of go, well, something broken.
Mm-hmm.
And then to go, oh, I'm not broken. I just have been working with this Ferrari only in first gear. I haven't been like really like diving into like the full potential of what the gift that I've been given. And actually the ones that have a great gift, if they don't work with it in the way that it was designed, it has the most system failures or whatever. That's just because you're actually dealing with something quite powerful.
Yeah. I did DMT back in October, 5-MeO DMT for the first time, and it was so crazy. My friend who was the facilitator, he's a former Navy SEAL, and he facilitates for veterans. And so he's like, maybe 5%, 10% of the time, someone will have a different kind of response aside from nodding off. Most people just smoke it, they nod off.
Yeah. And
so I'm like, oh, well, as the number one person in control of everything, like I'm not going to have some weird response, like whatever. And I smoke it, and I felt like I was just fighting. Like I went straight in, and I felt like there was a strap around my chest, and I was, and I saw that it was so safe. On the other side, and I couldn't let go. It was like it very much mirrored our experience.
I was just about to say this sounds so similar.
Like I was like, just so fighting it. And I kept hearing this like voice that said, this masculine voice beneath me saying, it's okay, let go. And I knew it was okay, but I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I come back to, and I was like, you guys, I need to go back in because I just felt so close. And I saw that it was safe on the other side of this, but I couldn't let go.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend was like, should we tell her? And I was like, tell me what? She was like, oh, you were masturbating and like crying. And I like full on just flailing around like a fish out of water, like baby, crying and masturbate. Like, and I was like, oh my God, that makes perfect sense. My body's doing what my mind couldn't do. So they're like, do you want to go back in? I'm like, fuck yeah, I do. And I went back in the second time.
And please send me the video memo of myself so I know what.
I know. I wish we documented it. And then I heard that voice again being like, fall, you can fall. And it was kind of like this energetic smirk back at me, like, I got you.
Yeah. And
I just let go. And what came out of me, like, I was not in the room, but it was like this feeling of like 37 years of suppressed like emotion, pain, pleasure, feeling everything. And I was like, oh my God, I've only been operating at 5% of what's available to me.
Yes.
And then I tied it back to my experience with you. And I was like, it's all here. We just need to access it. And I think most people don't even know what's available to them. And that's like what you do, right? You show people what's available to them. And a lot of what you work with is like the erotic landscape, right?
Yes.
Can you explain what that is?
Well, I mean, this is essentially what the erotic landscape is: the range of physical sensations and experiences that you can have, joined with that landscape of fantasy and imagination, as well as then all of the different emotions and feels that come with it. And that landscape is broad. I mean, we talked about what the different kind of psychological triggers are for mental arousal. In terms of the physical side of things, of the erotic landscape, we spoke a little bit about like what are the roles that we're dealing with: active receiver, adaptive giver, but then understanding the body really as a system of pleasure as opposed to reproduction. And how does the body itself mechanically generate pleasure? What is the physiology of that? You'll speak again a lot of like Dr. Saida's work with, I love calling her Dr. Saida. It's a little bit kinky there. So that's one of my triggers there maybe, but like that little power thing there. And so the relaxed arousal, the ability to be in a predominantly parasympathetic state, which is, we'll get back into the session, how that then starts to get triggered and brought into a sexual experience, which predominantly is like not trying to squeeze and force for an orgasmic outcome. Then the last part is understanding, well, then there's the body mechanics, and then the last one is like the intentionality of a sexual experience, where it isn't just about an orgasm, but it's also not about avoiding the orgasm, or it's not just about talking, but like, how does the sexual energy and charge that we generate inside of our bodies and with a partner drive us towards the values that we have, the desires we want to have as our outcome, as opposed to away from it. The same way that, can you use your exercise, diet, and education to bring you towards achieving the goals that you want, as opposed to it being a distraction or something that actually like works counter to that. Yeah. So when we were then going through the experience, like at that beginning was your body's ability to start to experience calm, to actually bring something into yourself, to be at choice there. Later, when you're working kind of a little bit deeper, which would be what's traditionally called like the G-spot area, there can be like anger that comes up. There can be pain that comes up, but also too, sometimes it just turns into this, like, just like a deep sense of like greed and neediness. And that ability to not deny it and go into some Zen state, but go, okay, no, how can I actually start to move my body in coordination with another body to be able to actually satisfy the hunger.
Like your taker, right? If you look at the wheel of consent, the take, would that be?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, well, this is interesting. So like, both with polarity as well as like the wheel of consent, I look at those as diagnostic tools for when things have actually gone off. So like, if you were to look at the wheel of consent, they don't really address mutual pleasure. It's needing to understand the turn taking, so that way you can diagnose where things are going off between the couple. But ultimately though, when you start to go beyond this a non-dualistic states, and you just kind of find unity, all of that melts. You're taking, you're receiving, you're giving, and it's from a place though of concordance between each other.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I still get stuck there. I think most practitioners do, most people do, right? It's like, so much of my work is like figuring out what those dynamics are, but just that mutuality of the attunement and like let's stop ascribing names to it and just be attuned. And it's those micro shifts all the time that are happening. Like, how do we get to that state?
Well, so the way specifically that we were dealing with that was, if you remember, I was having you be the one to choose how you're coordinating your hips, how you're moving them with what we built, those body mechanics at the beginning, but then guiding me and telling me if I'm going to either like be still or move with you or move counter to you, which again are just words, but from the body practice, like these are actual physical things that we're doing. And that allowed you to feel, okay, these are sort of the three different gears that we can switch into in terms of generating sensation and then going into pleasure. And then you knew, okay, if I choose this one, it will dial it up this way. And if I go to this one, it'll dial up that way. I can trust him to go there. And then eventually, as that energy built up, we then were working deeper and deeper into your body. But again, it's not me going deeper, because of the way you're using your body mechanics, you were actually bringing your cervix down. I mean, the way that your body is built, I don't know if, are you comfortable with me sharing about some of the details of your anatomy?
Go there.
I mean, like at the beginning, I was not able to make contact to your cervix. You have the capacity to take something that is longer. However, though, I mean, and my finger would be technically probably like less than a micro penis, like, in terms of like my middle finger. And yet when you though were being invited and you were using your body mechanics, there was no issue for your cervix to reach towards and make contact with my finger. And the difference here, and I mean, I've spoken to so many women that, I mean, you never said that you were a size queen or not, but like there's, I'm not going to say it, but you know, one has impressions and then they can test it out.
I told you.
And so, but almost always every time I've spoken to like size queens, and there's a lot out there, and they would say, and I'd be like, well, what's your best sexual experience? And they're like, yeah, it was this one time. I was like, well, how big was the guy? And they'll be like, well, actually, he's kind of was average, or frankly, he was kind of small.
Best sex I ever had, like last year with the younger man. Like not just a normal, like not, yeah. But I felt so much more. It's like I felt so much more, you know.
And this is because if we're predominantly in that sympathetic state of like, give me the pleasure, like typically a woman's going for that initial stretch because she doesn't feel much later.
Mm-hmm.
And then she goes numb, and then she's like, okay, I just want this guy to get done. Maybe they'll like have brought their vibrator in, had an orgasm.
Or she'll fake it to get him done faster.
How would you know about that? Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But normally they do that though because they've started to become bored.
Yeah.
And feeling a bit numb with this thing, or it's even like going into pain and other things. And so they're like, okay, I'm just going to bear through to like get him to do his thing. And then they'll kind of feel pleasure for that little burst where the guy is, because they're getting a vicarious pleasure, which is how a lot of people, and I don't want to just say women, but anyone on the receiving side, because when I've coached, you know, gay men, they're also like, no, like the time I feel the most is when my partner's.
No, that's a mere activation thing, because, you know, we get aroused by how we're perceived, women do. So it's like the same part that's activated in empathizing and mentalizing. We want to see you get aroused by us, so that it does give us pleasure, right? Which is why like you taking what you want from us can also do that. But like you said, it should be a both and, because or else we're bypassing what else our bodies can do for us and how else we can connect.
Well, and that's kind of where, like, when I looked into like the mental triggers of that, it could be several different ones. Like one for a woman, sometimes she's like gets off on the power of being able to get the guy to come, because it feels like power. Other women, it's like that's the closest they feel towards like some spontaneous feeling of sexuality that comes about because now there's like a physical sign of explosions. The guy's orgasm. I've done a good job. It kind of happens. It gets very exciting in that moment. There's validation. So then they feel the sense of spontaneity there. Or it could be that after the guy orgasms, he then kind of becomes soft. And so then it could be with that kind of internal environment that's necessary, a sense of like feeling some bit of connection. So each of these things, even though there's a certain action that's happening, is playing into the different parts of the mental arousal. Well, the part that you'd asked about, where's that connection then to the cervix and the heart? So you bringing the cervix down to be met, or with the guy you said that was average, there's actually space for that. Whereas if you're looking for just the big stretch and the size thing, like, well, what happens is the girl is like getting pushed so deep that the cervix is actually pushed back and can't become erect and come down. But this again flies into the face of what we've been taught around sexual anatomy. I mean, Sherry Winston's book, I think it's like The Anatomy of Pleasure, is one of the top books out there on this. And page 132, I think, or 123, one of the two of those, is like there's a paragraph on orgasm, and it literally says that the cervix retracts itself to remove itself out of the way of the battering penis to create a sperm receptacle. And that's how we understand and even define then orgasm, which is like 8 to 12 contractions over a period of like 8 to 12 seconds, with like increasing intervals in between, starting at like 0.8 seconds and then increasing in latency until termination. Something like that. I think Nicole Prouse has that definition, which is like, but that's like a very specific way of orgasm that then leads to a lot of the things that you're saying, which is like these feelings of disconnection, or kind of like more of like the sympathetic state where then you have the peak and then you're kind of done. Most of the times that's brought about with a vibrator. Most of the times too, if you're with a guy, he's going to explode before then. But you're literally using these different dynamics of bringing your own cervix down at the pace and choice of your own body, being able to gauge up in regulation and then down regulate when you were feeling like you needed some more like calmness, and then go again. So there is these cycles and loops of the body entering into again, truth, which is, yes, my body wants this. No, it needs to pause here. Yes, it wants this. Then feeling the ability, not just my responsibility, but your own responsibility to act, to show it out.
Mm-hmm.
Then that built trust, both with yourself, knowing, okay, I can actually be a part of this. Plus, I trust this person that is here with me because they're not doing anything that's, causing me harm.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's allowing then for like that more celebration to open up. And eventually what happened was, as your cervix started to dilate, there was one last component,
Mm-hmm.
which was one, getting you to bring your voice in so that you're more expressed through the vocal cords.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if you remember, at one point it was first my hand and then eventually my head, and I put it on your heart.
Mm-hmm. I do remember.
And I felt like there was just this huge sense of warmth that came out of you. And that to me was when I saw the beauty inside you that I knew that was there. And I remember, like, after when we spoke, I said, you have such an immensely beautiful and large and giving and capable heart that, like, the thought of you not having an emotional connection, like during sex, almost seems alien because this part of you is so beautiful. And it's a piece that is, I think it can be difficult when one has such a great image on the outside to like have somebody like truly see and connect to that in any phase of whatever else things might look like on the outside,
Mm-hmm.
especially if we're both used to evaluating ourselves externally or being evaluated that way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was a big, major shift for me and got me just deeper and deeper into this work and the embodiment of it all. And like what I'm trying to do constantly now with my own work and then, with my own clients is like, how do we bridge that gap, which I know you and Saida do too, of like bringing the touch work to the integration and like merging it all together. So it's not just theory, it's not just methodologies. It's like we're integrating that through touch. We're being present with one another, Erin, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Wanted to ask you a couple takeaways before we close out here. What's the one thing that you wish more women knew about men and men's sexuality?
That when a man says that they want to have sex with you, it doesn't necessarily mean they're just looking for a shallow connection. Even guys that are like, no, I just want to fuck you and then be done with it. The reason why they're driven towards the sex is because it is a way that they start to open up and become unlocked. And also for them to get to know and actually like encounter you on a deeper level. And so there's this idea that sex is just for men. If women could know that sex is actually for themselves as well. And when I say sex, I mean intercourse. And by intercourse, I mean, there's all sorts of studies that show like specifically like PVI, penis to vagina intercourse has, or just, you can even just say penetration has like different levels of like affecting health positively, affecting the relationship positively. And so to break out of that frame that this is just for getting off, but that it can actually be a genuine expression of connection, and that men deeply do want to serve women. I mean, this was something that's a whole other story that we could go into, but I had an extensive period of time working with men in prison. And these guys, definition of toxic masculinity, but they deeply, deeply, deeply wanted to serve women, but they just didn't know how. And they were faced with the conundrum of admitting that they don't know how, and then a woman's not going to be interested in them, or faking it and having a certain amount of fun for a particular time period until then, like everything falls apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that's...
I'd love to dig into that more next time. Like we could keep talking for like 5 hours here. What are you up to now?
Right now, I've been, actually just of today, we have released the the new platform for Embodied Love University. And so the first one was very clunky and like a first version, and the second version has been completely redesigned. And so that's a really experience. Like, I mean, that whole experience has been quite amazing to be leading a team that way. And so we have like literally our first 3 beta testers starting out today, testing out that platform. And then we're going to extend that to kind of like a closed group, of which you'll be one of those.
Can't wait.
And then after that, letting it out to like the entire podcast group. And so that was one aspect of it. And the other part is really just stepping into doing more bespoke coaching, one-on-one or two-on-one, working with in coordination with Saida and working with couples. And then the last part would be a big shift that I always kind of go where things are being asked for and where then I feel the right match. And so as of this November, I have focused on men specifically because they're the ones that have been reaching out and really being like, I'm ready to put in the effort and not just talk about it. And so since they've been coming out, I've been putting a lot more effort towards how do we bring men in a way that are invited into this, because, and for good reasons, a lot of this world around sexual wellness has been led in probably the last 10 or so years predominantly by women with a strong languaging that makes sense to women, which makes sense because that had been really negated, but it doesn't really translate though in a way that guys are feeling kind of invited into that. And then it's kind of almost like there's men's work and then there's women's work. And men's work a lot of times doesn't actually deal with the sexual aspect. So the ability to integrate sexuality with men's work in a way that isn't just them as a monk on their own, but in coordination with a partner, which what I would say in terms of my own personal life, like my greatest practice, I know sometimes you ask this question, so I hope I'm not stealing your ability to ask it, is like, what's your own personal practice that you do the most of? And that I'd recommend to people is like choosing a partner wisely.
I love that.
And that means the first step, which I think you mentioned a little bit before we started pressing record, is like, how do I navigate this balance of being single and being out in the world, wanting to find the right person? And we have a tendency, I think, to kind of, men do this a lot with porn, for instance, to pendulate between, I'm just cutting myself off. I'm going to sexually abstain. I'm going to do semen retention and just pretend I don't have a dick for like, the next 6 months or whatever, versus swinging the other direction and becoming extremely sexual.
Yeah.
And that ability for you to actually learn to harness your own sexual energy and be active with yourself in a way that you can find your truth, be responsible, establish trust, have these different sensations, taste the pineapple. And then from that place, look for those lessons that you've learned with yourself and have that be reflected in a relationship with another person where they respect you to the same level that you've now learned to respect yourself, and hold that as a standard would be a pretty good first step.
That's a great takeaway. I love that one. Yeah, everyone should listen to that. And lastly, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram, Suction Sex, or as well, embodiedloveuniversity.com is the big hub, which is everything for community, all the different teachings, which are essentially also medical protocols to be able to approach and open up your body and your psyche and your relationship, whether the focus is on yourself or your partner or doing things together. That would be the place to find it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Aaron.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening today. You can follow us on the Next Man Up _pod on Instagram or on YouTube at Next Man Up with Coral. Please feel free to slide into my DMs with any thoughts, feelings, or praise, and let me know who you think should be the next man up.